vibration. You have to fix copper. You lose the whole charge, whether you're putting in a new line set, putting in a new line, putting in dryers, compressor, repairing a coil because the cushions under the bottom of the coil rotted away and the coil vibrated on the bottom, and it's Friday afternoon and it's a retail store that needs air for the weekend. You got to do what you got to do. On the sheets, there's different ways of assembling copper. And if you're sent to dry fit a job, get a copper ready while something else is going on. Copper gets attached between flare fittings, solder joints, compression fittings, and there is a chemical bond that you can use. And a lot of it has to do with the area that you're working in. What's accessible. If you take out a torch, oxyacetylene torch, 27 to 3,000 degree flame coming off the end. Turbo torch, 2,200 degrees, but it has a bigger front flame. That one's pinpoint. Oxyacetylene, you actually, if you stay in one spot too long, too close to the copper, not only do you have to fix the hole that you put in there, but you have to fix the hole that you just put in with the torch. The turbo torch uses acetylene and air. It's not a pinpoint flame. It's harder to blow a hole in copper. It's easier to solder. If we're soldering copper, whatever you do with copper, make sure it's clean. But soldering copper is not like plumbing. If anybody soldered plumbing, when the copper gets cherry red, it's time to go. Throw the solder on it and walk away. It's a lot more forgiving. But we're also dealing with a lot higher pressures than plumbing. Discharge line off the compressor, close to 500 pounds of pressure. Before it goes into the condenser, then it drops down a little lower. So 500 pounds against 50 pounds of water pressure, big difference. And our stuff has to be a lot stronger and a lot tougher. If you're soldering, there's different kinds of solder joints. There are street L's, regular L's, meaning elbows, and couplings, besides T's and reducers and everything else. The difference is what they're used for. So if you have to go get a job set up, you have to know what you're putting out the layout. You don't need to have to shove it inside of each other. Street L's go into a coupling or into another fitting. It slides into. It goes into. A regular elbow has a belled end, so copper goes into each end instead of the street L going into something. And couplings receive copper into both sides. And then you have the reducers to go from whatever size you have down to whatever size you need to. And there's reducing couplings and reducing bushings. Bushings go in, couplings go over, depending upon what your purpose is. Coupling, you put the copper into, a bushing goes into something. If you have a compressor and you have your fitting already on the compressor, it's a 1/2-inch fitting and you have 3/8 copper. Don't take a piece of 1/2-inch copper and then put the 3/8 copper into it because it's not the same fit. A bushing would go into the compressor and the copper would go into that. But if you're running a long line and it reduces down, you get a coupling that's 2 different sizes. So the copper gets a clean fit. Part of the problem with soldering them is if you have to splice a line together and you put a coupling in there, well, when you solder it shut, you have 2 points for leaks, one on each side of the coupling. All our copper is OD outside of it. If you have to join 2 pieces of copper together, what do you do?
I swedge it.
It's called swedging the copper. It's a mechanical way of expanding the piece of copper you have so the other piece of copper goes inside. If it's a piece of 1/2 inch copper and you need to join them together, you would swedge one side, the other side would go in. Now you have one potential leak because there's only one solder joint.
Okay.
They sell great big expensive tools, everything from looks like a medieval torture device that you put into the copper and beat the backside of it with a hammer and expands it out, to ones that go into a block with a yoke and you squeeze it into, and then there's the high-end ones that are, actually there's a picture in there on the paper of the hydraulic one. That's about $600.
Oh, you're gonna talk
The
about
other kind that is getting used a lot, you can open up, so pass them around.
Here.
It's called the spin swedge. They also make it in flaring, where you put one end into an 18-volt drill,
Just leave it like that.
squeeze the trigger all the way. It's not directional. It will heat the copper up and it will expand the copper out. Wear gloves. Once it's done, don't grab within 6 inches of the end because trust me, it is hot. The other way of doing it is flaring. A lot of the mini splits that are out, a lot of commercial stuff gets flared in for the reason of if it has to be changed, the less time you heat up copper, the better it is. The less time you heat up copper, the less chance of putting contaminants into the system. A flare is easy. 2 wrenches, loosen it up, tighten it up when you're done. Depending upon what you're working with, it should be torqued down to the correct setting to keep it from leaking. And torque it down to 50 pounds.
You got a torque wrench?
Yes, I do. Guys just take a 6-inch adjustable or 8-inch adjustable. Doesn't cut it. You don't know what it is. And depending upon what you're running through, whether it's hot gas, liquid, or suction line, which is cold, heat expand, cold contracts. If you don't get it right, you will develop a leak at that fitting. This is a torque wrench. And you can get it to exactly what you need. When you get it to what you need, you're done. In a perfect world, after you make the flare, you put a bonnet bushing in and tighten it up. Once it's tightened up, you're done. They don't leak. That's old school refrigeration. Battery operated. They clip on the flare fitting. And when you tighten it up and you torque it down, you go home Friday afternoon, you won't see that job again. Because it's done.
Every 90 you put in, you lose 20% of efficiency in your unit.
No,
Is that not? That's not correct.
no.
What do you lose?
Typically every 90 you lose 10 feet of run.
10 feet around.
190 is equal to 10 feet when you run numbers. A unit is figured no more than 20 feet away. You start putting in 90s, you're not going to have the capacity that you need because of the 90s. The bigger the sweep, you may make it up. As far as the 45s, we have benders that actually bend the copper to whatever degree you need and put the bend where you need it with the right size elbow instead of a tight elbow. And the other way to bend it is a spring bender, which is great. It keeps it from kinking, but you never get the spring off.
Yeah. I've seen a unit where they left it on it.
This might have been one I did. What size?
1 1/8.
Inch and an 890. Okay. Store bought. Here's a 7/8. Lot difference in size. 1 1/8 is even bigger, but unfortunately, 1 1/8 copper that's worth anything doesn't come bendable. They sell it, but it's not round. It's oval. and we like to use round copper, because when it becomes oval, it's not the same size. Engineered copper comes in sticks, it's dehydrated. When you pull the plug out, if it does a little, bring it back. You're gonna waste your time with the job. Bigger 90s, less restriction, more efficient. The machine's going to one to a point, but you're not losing the length. When you start exceeding the maximum required length of anything, you start losing efficiency. Put the right 90s in and that won't happen. It is recommended by the manufacturer that you change your gauges every 60 days.
It's a lot of money to change gauges every 60 days.
Yes, it is.
Just change your hoses, right? Eventually, or your gaskets.
You get that, ask me about that later. You can go look at my truck.
Yeah.
Flares make life easier. Those are flare nuts. Inevitably, when you make the flare fitting on the end of the copper, the flare is a 45-degree angle. You're going to make it too big where the nut won't go over the end. You're going to make it too small where it won't bite. And what normally happens is the flare comes out absolutely perfect, but you've got to put the flare nut on. And again, whenever we're working with the copper, whether it's soldering, flaring, even in a bender, keep it as clean as possible. If you're going to solder, you don't have to sand it down. It is recommended. And when you cut the copper, you have to cut the burr out of the inside of the copper. It is a restriction. Start losing efficiency, you start losing oil. The more restrictions you have, the less oil that goes through the system. You can patch a system back together again with enough restrictions. You're not getting the oil back to the compressor, you're going to eat a compressor. So carry bizarre stuff in your pockets, it comes in handy. I carry a little flashlight. I used to catch hell for it until we start working and it gets dark. So give me that flashlight. Get your own. Here.
For your cell phone, but then you get mastic on it.
You tell me the battery's dead and what you call it wouldn't come on.
Right. Two flashlights. But two different flashlights. No.
One. We got one.
Besides being handy, the magnet on this one too, depending upon where you're working as a service tech, it's never opportune times. Little mag lights, where any mag light was made to take the top off and stand on the counter as a candle. And sometimes that makes all the difference that you need to do when you're working as it's getting dark. Yeah. One more thing, and I'll go back to my truck and get a light. Ain't happening. When they make the flare and the yoke goes down, the cone on the cheap flares goes straight down and it crushes the flare. This is for our industry, this is a cheap flare tool. This is the flare block, this is the yoke. When you spin it, the end of the cone wobbles around in an eccentric. So it works the copper out and it doesn't break the copper.
But you said the cheap ones just go straight down
Yeah,
and just cut through it?
it just bends it out.
Breaks it?
And yeah, typically they break it because it's not working it out. It's
Right.
forcing the issue.
okay.
Most places have a value line, if you will. The parent company to that is Lennox, and their stuff is blue and white, and it's premier stuff. I believe they're all Lennox too, the tubing cutters. But when you go to the sub-brand, it's just not. No. But you're in the industry and you're working in the industry. If you break a tool, first of all, you don't want it to break. But if you do, you at least want it to be somewhere where you frequent on a regular basis, so you don't have to carry receipts with you. You don't have to go out of your way to get a tool replaced. Supply houses carry just about everything we need.
Expensive.
There is a Johnstone in Tampa that all of the tools have different prices. If you're somebody that comes in the door and you're not in the trade, you're not supposed to be there in the first place, they will sell you tools. Break out a black card, because you're gonna need it. If it's a technician that buys the tools and goes there on a regular basis, they mark their cost up 5%, because they would rather have you have the tools you need to do the job. Plus, you're gonna come back to it. Channel locks are actually, it's called slip joint pliers. They have ones with a thumb press that you lock to the next one. And they're really thin. You can, once you get a bite on it, you can put a pipe on the top bar of the handle, and it doesn't slip. The harder you press, the harder it bites until that tool snaps. But it won't loosen, it won't break, it won't loosen its grip on whatever it's biting into. Pick up my stuff in my pocket. I got a 3/8 nut driver in my little 12-volt Milwaukee impact gun. Is a reversible 1/4 5/16, an adjustable wrench, a 6-in-1 screwdriver, and a meter. Sometimes you cannot get the flare where you need to go, no matter what you do. And the first time I tried this, I went to a parts house, went to a tubing cutter to where it had to go, or a flare block. We ran a line set through a wall. And the lovely stucco guys put a staple into my pipe. And it was so close to the wall, I can't solder without setting the house on fire. I couldn't get an asbestos, not asbestos anymore, flame blanket behind it to solder it shut.
Hammer.
Sorry?
They had to be hammered and they come fix it.
I get the job done.
Yeah.
I couldn't get the flare in there to put a flare on the end of it, to put a flare union, which just is the same on both sides. So I wound up, they worked. And that was the first time I did it, and that's when I realized once you flare it out with this, don't grab the end of the copper. You only do it once. And it burns in memory into your head and your flesh. There is another way that I don't have the sample here, but it's called bonding. And a lot of the stuff we've had to do that's come up is mother of invention. Necessity is a mother of invention. South Florida, if you're in a condo, you can't put a torch in there. Not allowed. Fire hazard. So they have a chemical epoxy set that's good for 3,800 pounds burst pressure. It's not used that much around here because for some reason people don't know, don't want to use it. Before we're done with the course, I will have catalogs for you from Johnstone, supplied from Ari Michaels, and from United Refrigeration. All the catalogs carry stuff that's a little different, so it's great bathroom reading. To find out what products are out there. What product's gonna make your job easier. Formulas and calculations in the books that come in really handy down the line. How much does a gallon of water weigh?
8 pounds.
So when you start figuring weight on stuff you need to know. How do you figure the circumference of a circle?
Pi.
Pi r squared. Radius squared. Which is important because if you have to replace a section of copper and you pull it off the roll, nobody measures out what they used. And nobody measures out what's left on the roll. But if you know how many rings are on the roll, tape measure across it to the middle of it, across from center of the roll to center of the roll, you can figure out how much is left on that roll and how much you just used. And the last way that we typically join copper is pressure fittings. Trade name for us is Zoom lock. That's why I chuckle when he's not here. So things are not, good tools are not cheap. If you have to change out a refrigerant dryer on a system, it typically involves getting the new dryer, cutting the old one out, cleaning up the copper, putting it together, taking out the nitrogen, blowing nitrogen through the system so you don't get oxidation on the inside of the copper, taking out your oxyacetylene torch, getting it all set up. As soon as you strike the fire and you get it near the pipe, you find out that your gauge is wrong on your tank and your acetylene runs out. Then you go back to the truck, get the empty acetylene tank that's there.
Your oxygen runs out.
Yeah, after you get the new acetylene, the oxygen runs out. And whenever you use the torches, as soon as you're done soldering, turn the valves off.
And then let the air out of your hose.
I don't care if you let the air out or not, but turn the valves off, because if your gauge, if the valve on your handle doesn't close all the way, you're just letting all the gas out. And if it's acetylene, could be a problem. If it's not enough of a buildup to create a problem, you could wind up out of acetylene. Tanks get secured down.
Refrigerant rack.
Yes. Acetylene tanks, nitrogen tanks, oxygen tanks, everything gets secured. This is zoom lock. Very careful with your hands. Put that over the end of the fitting. The tool has everything you need, basically. This is not from Zoomlock because, sorry guys, I'm cheap. I don't want to spend the extra $400. Goes into your copper for the right size, and it marks where your copper has to be. You take the Sharpie, you mark the copper, and you put it in. When you unroll copper, use a table, use a floor. Take the edge down and roll it out.
Use your foot.
You guys will do it next.
For selling the most training needs.
It's 3/8 copper. Slide that in. No.
What do you mean in? Oh, in.
So the end right there is where you need to make the mark.
Okay. Mark it.
Yep. Before you do that, like I said, you need to make sure that the end is prepped, that you deburr it. There's two kinds of way to deburr the inside. The knife or the sanding cone. When you use the zoom lock, use both sides. This goes on the outside and the cone goes on the inside. So if you would, over the bucket, you don't want to make a mess in here. You want to make sure it fits right and you don't have any restrictions.
You just have to clear up the burrs, right?
Yep. Yep. And then do it over the outside.
Does all copper come with burrs then?
When you cut it with a tubing cutter, yeah. Because you're pressing down on it to run the knife blade around it.
Almost like a crown.
And guys, you only get to do it once for the most part because it's all out of my pocket. And
Fittings are probably expensive.
what's your copper coupling cost?
Was it like $3?
Copper coupling,
Oh,
39 cents, 40 cents,
40 cents.
$4. How long does it take to solder copper coupling on?
Seconds.
Start to finish for the whole job.
Oh, probably about 5 minutes, 4 minutes, 5 minutes.
Slide that on until you hit that mark.
I feel like I'd almost rather just use the torches.
In each of the edge. Squeeze the trigger. Don't stop till it tells you to. You're done. The copper will burst before that joint does. That fast. That easy. No flame. No oxygen, no acetylene, no torch, no vacuum.
You gonna cut that?
Right about there.
Where is it?
I don't care who wants to cut it.
Hey, your little strap pieces up.
Right?
No, no, just leave more in the middle.
Gonna sit on the rollers.
And
Okay.
sit on the roll,
Okay, I got
but
you.
slide it down
Gotcha.
about here. No,
Slide it where?
Slide it down about here.
Alright.
Keep going. Alright. You've cut copper before?
Yeah.
So once you cut the copper,
Plumbing copper.
same idea. This goes on the inside, 2 spins around, and you took the burr off the inside. You done flying?
Brian.
No, I have to.
You need to get them.
You said inside, right?
Inside and outside. When you make a flare,
That good?
yep. Try with that.
Inside?
2 turns. Over the bucket. That's all you need to get the burr off.
Sometimes when you do it too, try to keep it upside down so you don't get any on the inside.
Make sure it's horizontal or down so the burrs go down, not into the copper where you solder.
Okay. Alright.
Slide the tool to where it has to go. There's lines to mark it. And make sure the pin winds up in the hole. And tighten it all the way down. I would let you do that, but flare nut first. Just to the inside, so it looks just like that. And lock this to here, screw it down tight, put the flare on.
That's good.
Can't see it from my house. If the zoom lock ever leaks,
You gonna cut it again?
it's copper, solder it.
Cause you don't wanna use all those fittings are $4 a piece.
There you go.
Looks like
Oh.
James.
Yeah, that's what I gotta do, right? Yeah. It is.
Put a primer ball and a bullet on it.
3/8.
It goes, no, it goes this way. Yes. Slide the flare off,
Yeah.
the tool off. Slide the yoke all the way down. Slide the nut over the edge. Understand it's all right?
Yeah.
Close as you possibly can.
Cut it down far enough because you're still gonna do other stuff with it.
Right.
Once you're done cutting it off, give it back to him because he's gotta do a flare.
Does it feel like it's getting loose? Can you turn it?
Alright, did you want?
Yeah. It's got a half life, not 2 year, you know?
We're going to
This
full
was
coverage.
cut already?
Okay.
Roll it out flat. Need a 3/8.
Please.
That again?
That's it?
Just a hair, not more than a dime's thickness past it.
You're gonna go from the opposite direction, you're saying flip over.
Alright, in the opposite direction.
So I do this first,
And do what? Just do that?
just the hair.
Just do that?
Trim that.
And then what do you do? Was that locked or something like that?
Keep a little.
What time do we go to again? 8 or
That's 3/8, so that's,
Just press it together? Okay.
Yes.
Uh-huh.
Put my finger in the front.
I had it with
Feel
the
it come up?
What do you like to feel the level or something like that?
It won't be level, if your fingers out.
Okay.
When you feel it come up past the point,
Uh-huh.
feel it goes. Direction doesn't matter.
I'm sorry.
I'm sorry?
Direction doesn't matter.
No.
Oh, okay, all right, so you tighten it up to the groove.
And way it goes. Take it to spin, if it starts to spin, you go immediately. You want to grab your pair of pliers.
I had this like on top of
Or you can lock it in the flare and block.
All right, that's locked, that's up.
You can lock it in the
Just
flare
let
and
it
block.
How far down?
Okay.
Keep going through it again.
Seats in there now.
Mhm.
If you leave it, you go too far forward, side to side. It'll be filled out too much, it won't fit in there.
New copper. Anything else?
House or residential? Both?
Either or, wherever
Okay.
we get sent.
Keep your hands away from it, you said? Yeah.
That's it.
Just press this?
That's it.
Are you?
That's it. Go like here. The bag was 6
Release like this?
For 5 years.
Nice. Nice.
This is, it was 257.
They do that.
So you said, measure it out, put the thing on.
That's it. See, it's gotta be comfortable with this.
You know, some actually,
Oh,
Eric.
that's-
his jobs won't balance. I figured, get a chance to, you know what I mean? All that you do.
Keep it horizontal, that's supposed to be up in your life.
Oh, right, right.
So stick it in. Just sear it. Two twists.
When you use the turbo
Take it
torch,
out.
it doesn't heat it up like how it does sometimes. Like I have a turbo torch, but I was told to use, it totally takes long to raise it with that.
Use the wrong tip.
I did the same thing. I did the same thing. I wrote that.
Because I
Yes,
have one at home. I just don't know if
That's
I
good.
guess I can use that
Yeah,
instead of
slide it back,
using the
yeah,
boss's
that's it.
torches.
Wait, slide this back?
This
Yeah.
back.
Depends upon the tip.
It's a lot louder than the regular.
Slide it
Use it wide open. Smaller tips
Yeah.
are noisier. Bigger the tip, the quieter it gets. I've got a tip out of the truck that's this big around.
This way?
Can't use it on the MC tank.
Yeah, because mine's like that, one of the longer ones.
Tank doesn't really matter, it's the size of the tip on what you're gonna solder.
Alright.
You can solder with magnets with a turbo torch tip on the tank. They have them, it screws on the end of the tank. If it's a quick, simple repair, and you're not talking about inch and an eighth pipe,
Yeah.
you can use a little map tank with the turbo torch tip. Gets the job done just the same.
I was told it's better, a turbo torch is almost better to use on your aluminum than acetylene.
Turbo torch gives it a wider flame, almost as high, and you don't burn
Yeah, me
it.
too.
Okay. So that's why some people prefer to use that on the aluminum than the
If you
regular
go up north,
acetylene.
this is typically all you're gonna see. You're not gonna see oxyacetylene. Very rare.
The one that's heavy as fuck. I'm
sorry?
The one that's heavy. Yeah.
Because my one family member from up north, I inherited some stuff from him, and he gave me one like
You know
that.
what's nothing like New York?
Do you
You know what
use,
this is, right? New York? You're talking
You wanna go to
Is that far?
area,
about Boston.
do you use digital gauges? I traded my boss like 4 nitro tanks and he gave me a set of digital gauges.
there is an app. I'm just asking, that was in the last spot.
Yeah.
There's an app you can get from your phone. It works very well with Testo equipment. Testo's one brand. put the probes in the right
And then let
spot,
them cut it, and then we'll come into your.
enter all the information into the program.
Let me get some notes.
It will tell you exactly what the machine's doing for capacity for a cycle metrics to make sure that you can control the temperature and humidity. And it spits out everything. Do you guys want to try the flare, the spin flare? I don't have the 3/8 in the truck. I just keep it off. It's in the truck, under the shelf on the right hand side in the Home Depot bag.
We can just keep cutting them off. Unless you want me to get them.
No. Anybody want to try the spin flare or the spin swedge?
What do you mean, did we do that?
No, you're talking about that.
What's that? Let me, yeah, why not?
Yeah, I'll try it.
You're damn right. You did it already?
Yep.
I didn't even see you do it, I'm looking at you so I can see what to do.
How many times does it take to do it like this?
And what happened?
Probably a couple times around.
Wasn't even looking.
What's that?
So what am I supposed to do then?
You need a piece. I'm not gonna do it. You're gonna do it first because you did the plumbing and you get to see the difference, and then you'll shine it up too.
Sorry. Alright.
It's a solder. So, the regulator on these stays open all the way. Screwed in, yeah, it's all set to go. Open that up. And it has the accelerometer in there. Press the button. Keep the bottom up. Bottom up. The concrete explodes. Put the starter on it. Mix on the bottom. If you bend it into a hook, you put the torch right back where it was. You didn't do anything. You didn't get me. That's it. The oxidation builds up on the inside too. The oxidation gets skimmed up in the oil. That's not what we want. You can move it closer. Wait till you run. Get it hotter. Okay. Hold it there. Hold it. Put more solder on it. That's it. Only for a moment though. Open it all the way. No. Turbo torch is all or nothing. That's good. Just hold it in one spot. You don't have to. Not a turbo torch. Not gonna blow through it. Put it on the back side of the copper and pull it around. Go like that. That's it. Done.